What if the thoughts you call yours were only reflections, echoes shaped by noise, not insight? What if the fracture you keep avoiding is the doorway to the part of you that still thinks freely? And what if the real danger isn't manipulation, but the version of yourself you never became because you didn't question the script? Pause for a breath, and watch what rises when the mind finally stops running. A faint fracture forms in your awareness the moment you notice how easily the mind reaches for ready-made beliefs, as if someone else laid the tracks beneath your thoughts. You feel the shadow of that impulse tightening around your breath, guiding you toward agreement before you even understand what you're agreeing to. It's here you see how speed has replaced depth, how reaction tries to outrun reflection. But if the mind didn't choose its first thought, what else is choosing for you? There is a quiet tension when you sense how often you nod along to avoid friction, your face softening just enough to mimic certainty. Micro moments of hesitation reveal the pattern, compliance disguised as harmony, comfort masquerading as clarity. The echo returns when you notice how quickly you mirror opinions just to keep the air calm. What part of you keeps surrendering truth for belonging? Your attention flickers like a candle in wind when algorithms feed you ideas that feel strangely familiar, as though you thought them yourself. The mind relaxes into that familiarity, mistaking repetition for truth and comfort for conviction. You catch the subtle loop. The more the idea returns, the less you question why it arrived. If a thought becomes yours simply because it's repeated, where does your thinking actually begin? A soft internal pressure rises when you see how schools trained your body to sit still but never taught your awareness to stand independently. You recall the micro rules: raise your hand, wait your turn, don't question tone, don't challenge certainty. These gestures echo now as automatic behaviors, shaping the edges of what you dare to consider. How much of your current identity was formed by rules you never examined? Then comes the deeper fracture. The realization that society doesn't merely distract your mind, it scripts it. Every fast headline, every rushed opinion, every emotional domino nudges your awareness toward the path of least resistance. You feel the shadow of that script inside your own breath, moving before you consciously choose. If your thoughts can be shaped without your noticing, what would it take to reclaim the ones that are actually yours? You feel a tightening behind your thoughts as the constant flood of information pushes your awareness into shallow waters where depth can't survive. Notifications break your focus like small fractures in glass, each one splintering attention into smaller, quicker pieces. The mind starts choosing speed over substance, mistaking movement for understanding. When everything demands your attention at once, what quiet truth do you stop hearing? There's a moment when your breath shortens as your mind scrolls faster than it can process, chasing clarity through a storm of noise. You catch yourself reacting to headlines you didn't fully read, forming opinions built from fragments instead of insight. The echo returns as you replay how often you filled gaps with assumptions because your brain was tired. What decisions were made by exhaustion rather than intention? Your awareness thins when mental overload forces you into shortcuts, leaning on biases, familiarity, and the comfort of what feels true. You sense how instinct replaces analysis, how emotional tone outweighs actual meaning. A shadow of recognition comes when you notice how easily a confident voice overrides a careful one. If your mind chooses the path of least effort, who is choosing the path of truth? There's a quiet sting as you recall moments when you accepted ideas simply because they were visible, repeated, or popular. Your micro-reactions, raised eyebrows, quick nods, silent agreements, reveal how your thinking pivots toward whatever stands out first, not what stands strong. The loop tightens, visibility becomes legitimacy, and speed becomes certainty. How often has familiarity been mistaken for fact? Then a deeper silence forms beneath the noise when you realize your mind isn't overwhelmed by lack of intelligence but by excessive input. In that stillness, you notice how much clarity returns when you create even a second of cognitive space. The breath inside you becomes a boundary, a small rebellion against the chaos. If you paused long enough to question the flood, what would finally rise to the surface? A subtle hollow forms in your awareness when you notice how your eyes skim instead of read, as if the mind is afraid to linger anywhere for too long. Your attention jumps like a spark across metal, touching everything but absorbing nothing. The echo returns when you catch yourself reacting before understanding, responding before processing. If thought moves faster than meaning, what kind of thinking survives the speed? You feel a quiet distortion as your mind adapts to feeds built for impulse, not reflection, every scroll training your brain to crave the next hit of novelty. Long-form focus begins to feel heavy, almost foreign, like lifting a weight you once carried with ease. Micro moments of impatience, tapping, swiping, glancing away, reveal how fragmented your inner landscape has become. When did depth start feeling like discomfort? There's a tension in your breath when you realize deep reading, once a doorway, now feels like a wall. Your mind resists sustained attention, slipping away from complexity as if it were a threat. The shadow of that resistance lingers in your tiny fidgets, the reflex to check, refresh, escape. If your brain avoids stillness, how can truth ever be traced to its source? You sense a quieter alarm when you observe how digital consumption flattens nuance, turning layered ideas into headlines and wisdom into slogans. Your awareness narrows to snapshots, losing the slow unraveling that understanding requires. A loop tightens as you notice how often you form opinions from fragments rather than full meaning. What insights died in the space between the details you skipped? Then comes a deeper fracturing, the recognition that your cognitive architecture is being rewritten, not maliciously, but mechanically. Every swipe becomes a micro-lesson in impatience, every scroll becomes reinforcement for simplicity over substance. You feel the shadow in your breath again, tugging you toward speed instead of depth. If your mind is being trained to avoid complexity, what possibilities disappear before you ever see them? There's a soft tremor in your awareness when you notice how quickly the mind retreats from ideas that threaten your sense of self, as if truth were a blade. Your breath tightens when a belief is questioned, not because it's wrong, but because it's familiar. You catch the echo of that reflex in the way your shoulders stiffen during honest conversations. If comfort defends the illusion, what defends the truth? A quiet pressure forms when you realize emotional certainty has become more desirable than intellectual honesty. You watch yourself choosing agreement over accuracy, harmony over inquiry, relief over clarity. Micro-reactions, quick nods, softened tone, subtle withdrawals, reveal how you protect your worldview instead of examining it. What happens when your identity becomes a cage disguised as coherence? Your mind flinches from cognitive dissonance like a hand recoiling from fire, even when the heat is only insight. You see how easily people gather around ideas that soothe, not ideas that illuminate. The loop returns. Tribes offer belonging, belonging offers certainty, certainty offers escape from questioning. If comfort becomes the compass, how do you navigate toward truth? There's a deeper stillness when you admit the hardest battles aren't with others' beliefs but with your own cherished assumptions. You feel the shadow of fear in the silence after an uncomfortable insight, the hesitation to explore further. Your inner voice whispers that true growth requires sitting inside the fracture, not fleeing it. What parts of yourself dissolve when you tell the truth to your own mind? And beneath everything lies the recognition that emotional comfort is the most seductive rival of critical thought. Comfort asks nothing, challenges nothing, risks nothing, discipline asks for all three. Your breath becomes the threshold, the place where you choose between self-soothing and self-honesty. If you traced your gentlest beliefs to their roots, would you find understanding or avoidance? You feel an old echo rise when you remember how classrooms rewarded silence more than curiosity, as if stillness were proof of understanding. Your awareness tightens, recalling the choreography. Sit straight, don't question tone, follow the sequence without deviation. These micro-rules still shape your instincts, long after the desks disappeared. If obedience was the lesson, What part of you learned to stop asking why? A faint shadow forms when you notice how deeply memorization was mistaken for mastery. You replay moments of repeating information without ever being invited to think about it. Your breath catches as you recognize how performance replaced inquiry, how correctness eclipsed exploration. How much of your certainty was taught rather than discovered? There's a subtle ache when you recall how dissent was quietly punished, raised eyebrows, slower praise, a shift in the room's temperature. Your mind remembers pulling back, softening opinions, shrinking questions to avoid standing out. The loop returns as you realize how these reflexes still guide your social behavior. If you learn to minimize your voice then, where is it minimized now? A deeper fracture appears as you see how the system trained not the mind, but the reflex: comply, align, don't disrupt. Your awareness notices micro-habits, waiting for permission, seeking approval, adjusting tone to match expectations. These gestures feel automatic, inherited from a structure built for industrial sameness. What original thought never surfaced because you were trained to wait? Then comes the quiet recognition that the system didn't fail, it succeeded at its original purpose. It produced predictability, conformity, and adults who confuse safety with silence. Your breath becomes a mirror here, reflecting the gap between what you learned and what you needed. If your mind was shaped for compliance, how do you reclaim the part built for questioning? If this is hitting close to home, take a second, like the video, subscribe, and stay with me. A subtle distortion stirs in your awareness when you notice how outrage pulls your attention faster than nuance ever could. Your breath tightens as emotional spikes feel more meaningful than quiet truths. Micro-reactions, an eyebrow lift, a sharp inhale, a quicker scroll, reveal how your instincts are being trained in real time. If emotion becomes the hook, what becomes of discernment? You feel a quiet rupture when you see how algorithms reward whatever provokes you, not whatever informs you. Your mind leans toward the loudest voices, mistaking intensity for insight. The loop returns as you chase clarity through noise engineered to keep you unsettled. When everything triggers you, what guides your understanding? A shadow passes through your thoughts as you realize how tribal dynamics shape engagement. Agreement earns validation, dissent earns exile. You remember moments when you softened your stance just to avoid conflict. Your awareness catches the hesitation, the micro-pause before posting something honest. If your truth requires permission, whose voice are you actually using? There's a tension in your breath when you watch how speed amplifies misunderstanding, quick reactions masquerade as convictions. You sense how repetition cements belief, even when the content is shallow. The echo grows louder as you notice how easily familiar narratives override critical thought. What ideas have you accepted simply because they circulated long enough? Then comes a deeper recognition. Social platforms don't persuade you, they bypass you. They slip past your reasoning and appeal directly to your instincts, shaping not what you think, but how you think. Your mind feels the shadow of that pattern, the subtle erosion of patience and nuance. If the architecture of your attention is being engineered, how much of your perspective is truly your own? A faint tremor rises in your awareness when you catch your mind leaping to conclusions before the facts even form. You sense the flash of System 1, quick, emotional, automatic, moving faster than intention can intervene. Micro-expressions, half-formed judgments, instantaneous certainty reveal how reflexive your thinking has become. If the reaction arrives before the reasoning, who is actually making the choice? Your breath tightens as you notice how simplicity seduces the mind, clear villains, easy heroes, neat explanations. System 2 feels heavy, slow, tedious in comparison, so your awareness avoids it like a cold shadow. The loop returns when you see how repetition makes ideas feel true regardless of their accuracy. What beliefs have you kept simply because they were easy to hold? A subtle ache forms when you recall moments you agreed reflexively just to maintain social harmony. You remember nodding before thinking, aligning before questioning, absorbing before evaluating. These microhabits expose how groupthink rewards speed and conformity over depth and individuality. If hesitation feels dangerous, how does truth survive in your mind? There's a sharp internal shift when you realize how politicians, marketers, and influencers weaponize your fast thinking system. They craft messages that bypass logic and go straight to your emotional circuitry. Your awareness catches how your attention leans toward certainty, not complexity. What becomes of discernment when your instincts are being rehearsed by someone else? Then a deeper fracture appears, the recognition that your cognitive architecture is not just reactive but programmable. System 1 writes the script, System 2 only edits it if you force yourself to slow down. Your breath becomes the sole doorway between reflex and reflection. If you rarely step through that doorway, how much of your inner world is truly self-authored? A quiet weight settles in your awareness when you notice how often you grasp for ready-made opinions just to avoid the discomfort of forming your own. Your breath tightens at the edge of a difficult thought, the moment where certainty dissolves and responsibility begins. Micro-hesitations, glancing away, pausing mid-sentence, softening your tone, reveal how you retreat from your own insight. If truth demands ownership, what part of you keeps stepping back? There's a subtle tremor when you sense how attractive group identity becomes, offering safety from the solitude of independent thought. Belonging feels easier than autonomy, agreement feels easier than examination. You hear the echo of this trait in the way your mind smooths out contradictions to stay aligned with the crowd. If consensus protects you, what does it cost you? A deeper tension forms when you recognize how easily external authorities replace personal inquiry. You remember moments when you accepted an idea simply because someone confident said it. Your awareness catches the micro-relief of not having to think for yourself in that moment. When convenience replaces questioning, what happens to your inner compass? There's a shadowed silence when you confront how rarely you challenge your own motives or illusions. Your mind avoids the mirror, fearing what clarity might reveal about your patterns, attachments, and self-deceptions. The loop returns as you notice how quickly you defend your story instead of investigating it. If you fear your own reflection, how can you ever grow beyond it? And beneath everything lies the recognition that freedom demands courage, far more than intelligence ever could. Real thinking requires risk, losing certainty, losing belonging, losing the comforting myths you built your identity around. Your breath becomes the boundary between facing yourself and fleeing yourself. If responsibility is the price of awareness, what version of you waits on the other side of that choice? A soft dimming settles in your awareness when you realize how rarely you sit with your own thoughts long enough to hear them fully. Your mind reaches for distraction before reflection, for noise before nuance, for motion before meaning. Micro-gestures, checking your phone, shifting your gaze, pacing without purpose, expose your avoidance of inner stillness. If silence feels threatening, what truth waits inside it? There's a quiet rupture when you notice how external voices have become substitutes for your internal one. You repeat opinions you didn't form, adopt beliefs you didn't test, follow ideas you didn't question. The echo returns when you hear something that feels like your thought but realize it came from somewhere else. If reflection disappears, who is your mind actually speaking for? A subtle ache forms when you remember times you once debated yourself, challenging assumptions, exploring contradictions, refining understanding. Now, the inner dialogue flickers like a dying flame, replaced by shortcuts and surface-level certainty. Your awareness tightens at the gap between what you feel and what you articulate. If the inward conversation goes silent, how does wisdom survive? There's a deeper tension when you sense how quickly the mind defaults to consensus when it no longer questions itself. Without internal inquiry, your beliefs harden into habits, and habits harden into identity. You catch yourself defending ideas you barely examined simply because they feel familiar. If familiarity becomes truth, what happens to insight? Then comes the sharpest realization: the loss of inner dialogue isn't a cognitive decline, it's a psychological surrender. Stillness becomes rare, curiosity becomes foreign, and self-examination becomes optional. Your breath is the last remaining bridge back to yourself, the doorway to your own mind. If you rebuilt that inner conversation, what forgotten depth would begin speaking again? A quiet fracture opens when you feel how quickly your awareness recoils from truths that destabilize your identity. Your breath sharpens at the edge of an insight that threatens the story you've been living inside. Micro-reactions, averted eyes, a sudden swallow, a shift in posture, reveal how you retreat from yourself. If clarity asks for your illusions, what will you allow to die? There's a subtle ache when you notice how often you protect your comfort over your consciousness. You choose the familiar narrative even when it contradicts your experience. The echo returns as you sense how certainty becomes a shield against the unknown within you. If you never step beyond certainty, how far can your thinking evolve? A deeper tension forms as you recognize that avoiding thought is often a way of avoiding the mirror. Your mind hesitates at questions that might expose contradictions or unexamined motives. You feel the shadow of self-confrontation hovering behind every abandoned insight. If you fear your own depths, what wisdom remains hidden? There's a quiet rupture in the moment you admit that intelligence was never the issue, courage was. Critical thinking demands inner risk, losing old identities, releasing cherished illusions, dissolving outdated beliefs. Your awareness trembles at the threshold of that transformation. If growth requires self-dismantling, what part of you resists the rising truth? And beneath everything lies a final recognition: your mind isn't weak, it's afraid. Afraid of clarity, afraid of change, afraid of the responsibility that comes with genuine awareness. Your breath becomes the doorway between who you've been and who you could become. If you walked through that doorway now, what version of yourself would you meet on the other side? There comes a moment when your awareness settles, and you finally see how much of your thinking was inherited, rehearsed, or quietly shaped by the world around you. In that stillness, a sharper presence awakens, one that isn't intimidated by complexity, silence, or the responsibility of seeing clearly. You feel the subtle shift as your breath becomes an anchor, guiding you back to the part of your mind that cannot be manipulated. If you trusted that clarity, what choices would you stop postponing? And as this awareness deepens, you sense how every insight you gained here becomes a tool, one that protects your attention, sharpens your perception, and returns your inner voice to its rightful place. Let yourself follow that thread, breathe slower, think deeper, question more bravely. If this unraveling opens something in you, stay with it. There's more waiting beneath the next question. What part of your mind will you reclaim next?